Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, a GeneaVlogger, and on today's vlog, we will be continuing the series looking into the family tree of Sam Aronow. So for the first 4 episodes, we were looking at Sam's Aronow family, and we were looking at trying to trace that further back into Miglin, and we were able to make some good headway. But now we're going to switch and look at a different part of his family tree. For this side of the family, we're going to be looking at the Schenker family and the Chernick family. And we're just going to jump right into it. So here we have this branch of his family tree, and this is what he's supplied us so far. I'm going to do a quick pedigree family tree look just so everyone can see what it looks like. Because pedigree family tree, for those who don't know, this is what that is. It's a tree that just shows somebody's pedigree, aka just their ancestors. And we can see it's traced out pretty decently, but one thing that does stand out is noticing this commonality between the name Belets and Balets. And this is something that we are going to look into. But since the Schenker branch seems to be the shortest branch of the tree so far, we're going to focus on that. So we have Nahum Schenker, born 1887 in Odessa, died 1969 in Los Angeles. But we do have Nahum's parents. We have Ben Zion, which we probably are going to find as Benjamin, especially since we see 1935 Shaker Heights, Ohio is where he died. And even more, if we can get a gravestone, we might be able to identify his father. Then for his wife, Meta Balets, we have like nothing. So we're starting at not a whole lot, but we're going to do the same thing we did before, starting with hints, then we're going to go take it further. Now, Nahum has no hints. If you notice, there's no hints. More than likely what's going on is Nahum's name in the US was something different. My guess, probably Nathan, could be something else. So what I'm actually going to do is I will sometimes play around with the name of the person if I know specific names that they might have had. It's kind of similar as if we almost did the same thing with doing a search, except we're just kind of actually playing around with the profile. So just putting in Nathan, we're going to see if any hints pop up. So nothing really. Sometimes it does take a while for new hints to populate, so we're going to do a quick search. So we know we have Nathan Schenker, dies 1969. So let's focus on 1969 in Los Angeles. We're going to go over here, and we're not actually even going to put in a first name. We're just going to put in a last name. 1969. Death exact, and we're going to do Los Angeles. And just do exact this place. Sometimes you can do county. Actually, I'll go ahead and do county. The way to do searches, and I've said this in previous videos, is you want to start more finite and then get broader and broader, because if you start too broad, you may have too many results and it'll be hard to filter out. And then if you sometimes start too narrow, you may find nothing. And now we're going to do a search and see what comes up. And there we go. We have Nathan Schenker, the spelling here, Schenker. And, you know, we're going to expect this name to vary as we look at different records. And this gives us more specific stuff. We get a specific birth date, specific death date. Just like I said, the name seems to be Nathan. So we're going to save to our Nathan, and hopefully this should help us get more records to look at. So we can see the birth date here is very different than the birth date that Sam gave us. It is a very specific birth date, so I am going to save it, but I believe the system still keeps 1887 sort of like in its memory. So when it does searches, it will keep that in mind, basically. Do want to update the death date, save the tree. And then all of a sudden we see that now we have 10 hints. So now we've got a lot to work with. So if you don't have hints starting out, sometimes doing that search and just getting that one record to give you a little bit more information is going to help. So looking through, we get a lot of pretty good stuff. And what we're going to focus on here in these branches of the tree, we're going to try to focus more on family story, the narrative of the family. And that's a little harder to do, especially in these kind of almost tutorial-like videos where I'm showing you how the research is done, because the research often focuses on the names, the dates, the very bland, generic stuff that, people aren't really that into. So, we're going to look at how are we going to pull pieces out to get a narrative. So we're going to start, we have Ohio marriage. This is perfect. So we can take a look at a great marriage records. All right, so we have this loaded, and we see that they are right here. So we have Nathan Schenker, we have the address, 2711 East 53rd Street. We have his wife Celia, same address. We see born in Russia. We see that Nathan's occupation, he's a photographer. Now, remember that this date, this is 1914. He's a photographer in 1914, so that's really interesting. But then we get father's name, Ben, so a little different than Ben Zion. We get the mother's name, Meta Bellet, so we are confirming that name. And then for his wife, Celia Chernick, we have father's name, Israel, and then mother's maiden name, Ola Krosnar. Now we're going to focus on that part, that side, the Chernick side, a little later. It's probably going to be the next video, episode 6. But here we're getting a lot of good stuff, confirming what we have. So we're going to save that. Now notice the birth date is 1894 here. So this is giving me an idea that maybe the 1894 birth date is more realistic. But one thing everyone has to remember is just because you find something in multiple records doesn't always mean that it's going to be the correct thing. Just because, some people didn't always know their birth date, and you may have all these records and then you find the actual birth record and it's a different date. One thing that some other folks had pointed out in a previous video in this series was that the dates of birth may have been off because of the differences in the different calendars, whether talking about the calendar used in the Russian Empire versus the Gregorian calendar, and then even more also including the Hebrew calendar. And that's all assuming that people kept their track of their birth dates, because back in the day, not everybody really did. So it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily as common as it is these days. So we're going to add all of this stuff. See if there's anything really new. Nothing really new here. So save to tree. And there we go. We've got it. Nice. So now we've got census records. We have U.S. Social Security applications claim index. This is very likely this is for their daughter Martha. Which we're not going to focus really on that generation, although when doing research, it's good to do that kind of stuff, especially when tracing out to try to find living relatives. So then we get the 1920 census, so we have 1920, 1930, 1940. We have the draft record for Nathan. So let's see what it says here, because we're getting that 1894 birth date again, so that's probably right. We see that he's naturalized, so we'll probably want to try to find a naturalization record. And then we get, he's from Minsk, Russia, which is different than Odessa. Then we have he's a clerk, Newark Shoe Company, wife, married. And then it looks like they don't actually have the second page, unless it's just that I need to zoom out. All right. Sometimes that's how it is when there's multiple page records. You just have to zoom out. So we don't get a whole lot here. Medium build, medium height, color eyes brown, color of hair dark brown, not bald. So now this seems to be filled out in Chicago, Illinois, and that is a little suspicious because from what we know, he should be in Ohio. So this very possibly might not be him. Different address, but the birth date is right. So the other thing to consider here is, are we dealing with two Nathan Schenkers, and is there a possibility that there's a mix-up between them, so to say? So we're going to go back to the hints, and we're going to take a quick look. And more than likely, there probably are two Nathan Schenkers, one living in Ohio, one living in Illinois, both around a similar age. And then it just becomes a matter of, we need to always make sure when we're looking at records, we need to confirm that it is our Nathan and not a different Nathan, which is a very big thing when it comes to genealogy, because a lot of people unfortunately play the game of, it is this exact same name, it must be the same person, and that's not always the correct case. So now we're going to actually go back to the census records, because we're going to take a quick look at the family and just kind of make sure the family is as we think they are. So we're going to start out with the 1920 census. So now we're going to take a quick look and see, can we confirm, is this our Nathan? More than likely it is. And so when we scroll in, we see we have Nathan, we have Celia, we have daughter Martha and daughter Bertha. We have very specific ages, and it's always nice to see when it's stuff like this, 4 and 1/12. So then we have 1 and 10/12, same thing. So kind of just looking through, getting an idea. We have immigration stuff. So we're looking for that immigration information. 1908, immigration year, 1915 naturalization year. We also have the immigration year of Celia, which is 5 years later in 1913. Now we know that they got married in Ohio, so this makes sense that they would have immigrated in different years, because there really would, it would have been more of a coincidence if they had immigrated in the same year. So we know that we can possibly expect Nathan on the 1910 census, but we probably won't expect Celia. So now we're going to add all of that information in. I might cut this out because there's really nothing special about it. All right, so now we have that information added in, and now we're going to go to the 1930 census. And this one's very interesting because now we see that Nathan's parents are here. So we know that Nathan's parents then arrive later. So we're going to be seeing two different immigrations. We're going to see one from Nathan, we're going to see one from his parents, and then we're going to see a third from his wife Celia, but that's going to be different when we look into her side of the family. So looking at this information, we are getting a lot of the same stuff in terms of the name. So we know it's very likely them, especially because we have the father's name and all of that. So we can now kind of take a look and get an idea of the parents. So it's always good to look at the census or any record when there's a picture of it, because you just never know how the person indexing it was doing. Sometimes they don't do that well. Some people make crazy bad mistakes. But here we get a really good look at the family. So Nathan and his wife Celia, Martha and Bertha, who we saw from before. Then we also have David and Leo. Now it looks like Leo to me right off the bat, but then I notice the name is daughter. So not quite sure what the name is supposed to be. We can see that whoever indexed it also said Leo. Could be Leo, maybe Leonardo or something. I kind of doubt it, being a Jewish family. But once we add that in, when we look at the 1940 census, we're going to want to see who is that age, who's the next birth after David, who's a daughter, and that should be the proper name of whoever this is. But an interesting thing is we get the age of marriage for Benjamin and Bessie. And we notice Benjamin 27, Bessie 26, and they're 64 here. So what that's telling me is that Benjamin's just a few months older. So they're probably born within 12 months of each other. And then when we look over, we see that now Nathan is a fruit merchant, which actually before, I do apologize. We're going to just go real quickly and take a look at the 1920 census. Now, if we remember, when he got married, he was listed as a photographer. Then in the 1920 census, he's listed as a proprietor of a restaurant. So he was owning a restaurant in 1920. And then in 1930, if we can go back in time, then in 1930, we see that he's a fruit merchant. So he's jumping around. Now, there is a question. Was the restaurant technically the same thing that they're now calling that he was a fruit merchant? It's possible. But let's go ahead and get this added in. Now, this is going to be also very important because when we look at his parents, now we have more to work with. We know one, that Ben Zion, well, in the U.S., he went by Benjamin. So I am going to make that the main one. Different people choose how they want to make the names on Ancestry. Some people go by, I want to have it as close as the original name. Some people do the stacked name, so they'll have Benjamin, Ben Zion, Ben, whatever. I personally like to have it more familiar to me when I'm doing it on Ancestry, but I also like to do it in a way where I might be able to add as many alternatives as possible. So, Benjamin, I'm going to make that the main. I could save as an alternative. But then for Meta, we have a very different name, Bessie. And this could be that Meta could be a Hebrew name or possibly a Yiddish name, and Bessie is more of her anglicized name. A lot of women who were Bessie, they had a Hebrew name of Basia. I'm not really familiar with the name Meta, so one thing we can do is we can look into that. Now, in previous episodes, I went into a Facebook group and I sought help from people in terms of the names. I would also usually do that here, but in the basis of time and stuff, we're not going to focus on any of that really in the episode. But what I am going to do is I am going to make this an alternative name for her, because we don't have a death date for her, but we should find one because we know she was in the US. So we're going to add all the other stuff too. Nothing really new to change up here. We do have David. Then we have that Leo, who we're probably in the next one, and it's probably going to be a different name. And with the name Leo, it's also a good example of why it's important to look at the record, because we saw that the name, it looks like Leo, but it's also recognizable that it looks like it was crossed out or someone tried to write over what was originally written. So we know that it's very possible that it wasn't even meant to say Leo or look like Leo. It just happened to do that over time and because of the blending of ink and all of that. So now let's look at 1940. And we notice for the 1940 census, it doesn't seem like his parents are there anymore. Benjamin and Bessie are gone. Did they pass away? Well, we know Benjamin did. Not quite sure if Bessie did, so we'll have to look and see. So we do see we have Nathan, then we have Celia, and that X indicates Celia is the one that gave the information. We see that we have daughter Bertie, son David, and then, well, look at that. Leo all of a sudden is Leah. So now we know that really before they were trying to write Leah, for whatever reason it came out Leo. We do get basic information, nothing else that special. It looks like the family was one away from getting the supplemental questions right here. I did have someone ask about that after one of the previous episodes. They were wondering, well, what did you mean by if they were selected or chosen? And if you get selected in the supplemental questions, which you have to either be number 14 or 29, you then have more questions. So there's more information. So basically for us genealogists, if we're doing research on a family, we look at the 1940 census, and one of those family members is the chosen for the supplemental questions. That's like not a gold mine, but it's one of those things that's very pleasing to the genealogist. So looking again, we see that fruit stand, a retail fruit peddler. So he's kept up with the fruit thing, it seems, from here. We do notice that his wife, Celia, she's working as a cook in a restaurant. And except she has been out of work for 8 weeks. Now, this is one interesting thing with the 1940 census is you get an interesting view into how the family actually was. So we see that Nathan was working a 40-hour work week. We see that their daughter Bertie was working at a retail meat market as whatever, it looks like it says bookkeeper cabinet. I'm not sure. If someone knows or thinks they know what it says, let's see what the indexer thought. Bookkeeper cashier. Aha, maybe that is what it is. Maybe they were the cashier. But she was working 40 hours a week. And then we can see that he's worked 52. So he's worked for a full year. We see that she worked for 33 weeks in the year of 1939. And then we see that there was an income of $825. He has no income. Not sure why it would necessarily say it like that. Maybe it just has to do with him being a retail fruit market person. So now we're getting a pretty good idea of Nathan's life. And when you go to Life Story, this is one of the nice things a lot of people like about Ancestry is it tries to create that narrative. So here we see When Nathan Schenker was born on March 23rd, 1894 in Odessa, Ukraine, his father Benjamin was 28 and his mother Meta was 28. Now, if we remember before, we had the birth date or the marriage date, so then we can get an idea too. Were there children possibly born before Nathan? Was he the oldest? Could there be other siblings? And then we also have that, he married Chaya Celia Chernik, which we already know from the records. They had 4 children in 14 years. He died April 26, 1969. So we're getting a basic look. But we also have that idea of what was going on in terms of his life, because his job was changing. He was a photographer, then he was a restaurant proprietor, then he was working in fruit retail. So, what was going on with that? So now we're going to jump to Benjamin. We're going to take a look at his father, Benjamin, and we're going to try to focus on finding Benjamin's death information, because this should take us back another generation, presumably if we can get the gravestone. So we see there is nothing on Benjamin. So we can do a general search. Now we do have the ancestry hints, but we're not going to focus on anything like that right now. If I can spell right. So we want to do Schenker. All right, so then we have the birth year 1866. And we're just going to do 5 years. And then we know that he was living in Ohio. Specifically, we know Cleveland, but we're going to just do county for now. Kind of like I said before. You have to figure out that how narrow and how wide you want to do. So we only have this 1930 census once again. We do have a family tree that we see listed up here. But like I said, we're not going to focus on the family trees. So we see Schenker's exact. We're going to slowly kind of change that and change that. All right, so we've got nothing. So now what we're going to change, we're going to stop looking at birth year. We know that he died in 1935. And we're going to do a year gap for that. And we'll take a quick look and see.
2 hours later.
Now, I've been looking for a while, and I have not been able to find anything. So now I'm going to try to do something, because we have that 1935 date, but I don't know where it's coming from, because I haven't found any documentation. And so I'm going to open things up just a bit, and we're going to see. The assumption is at this point now that he died in the 30s. And I'm thinking maybe 1935 is just a generalization, which is sometimes used because the last record of him is 1930, and then he seems to disappear by 1940 in the census. So the assumption would then be 1935. So we're going to do a 5-year gap, because he had to have died sometime in that time. So we're going to take a look. Benjamin Schenker. Death 1935, and well, what do you know? We have an Ohio death record, Benjamin Schenker. So when we scroll up, we can see Benjamin, it's probably Benjamin's just cut off. Schenker, Cuyahoga County, hope I'm saying that right. And then we get more information. We have state file number, certificate, and then we have the date of death, November 16th, 1930. Now, there's a real quick way that we can see, is this actually our Benjamin? And basically, we need to look at, was the census record for 1930 before November? Because if it was, then this should be correct. We would expect this. If it wasn't, then it might just be that there's another Benjamin Schenker living in the area. And we can see that there are other Schenkers. Whether or not they're related, I don't know. I did take a quick look into it, and from what I saw, it didn't seem to be like there was any relation. So that just tells me that there's a very possible chance that there are other people with the same name living in Ohio. We see some of them are in Cuyahoga, others are in Columbiana. So there could be something going on with that. So we want to look further, but Ancestry doesn't always have all the records. So we're going to look at Family Search just like we did earlier, but now we have a better year. So we're going to take a look, and we're going to do Ben Schenker, And this time for death, we're going to do 1930 to 1930. Now, we didn't do the whole thing I said about looking at the census, but we can see if we get anything here. And we'll look. We have Benny Schenker, birth 1875, died November 16th, 1930. Well, that's what we have here, November 16th, 1930. So we know it's the same Benjamin Schenker that's listed in this index. So can we correlate it with the family? So we're getting this information. He works in dry goods. His father's name is Nathan Schenker. So we already have the father's name, if that's correct. And it makes sense, being that his son, who is Sam's ancestor, is also Nathan or Nahum. So we're going to take a look at the actual record. And so we see Benny Schenker. Now notice the address, and this is what is important more than anything. 10827 Drexel. Now everything else is matching up. We have wife Bessie Schenker, date of birth 1875. So we have Bessie again. She's still alive in 1930. We have his death, which I think is bronchopneumonia and then bronchial asthma. So he probably died of bronchitis. Then his parents' names. We have Nathan Schenker, birthplace Russia, maiden name of mother unknown, birthplace Russia. So we're not really getting a whole lot. But the big thing is, can we confirm that this is our Benjamin Schenker? So we're going to go back and pulling up the 1930 census. We know this is November 16th, 1930. We mentioned this. I mentioned the census needing to be before that, but now we have the address. So is that correct? And we'll look at this. Street address, Drexel. House number, 10613. And what do we have here? 10827. So it's the same street, but a different house. So it's very, very likely that this is our Benjamin. And we're just going to take a quick look at the date. So the date, April 8th, 1930. So months before November. So it could be our Benjamin. And then going down here, we get 10613. Just kind of looking again, we have 10827. Now, taking a look, do we have 10827 down here too? Because we have the signature of the informant, Nathan Schenker, which would presume is Benjamin's son, Nathan, and it looks like 10827 again. I think this is very, very, very likely our Benjamin. Everything seems to be matching up, and we seem to be getting a lot of good information that we can then work off of further. Now that we've gotten a good idea of things, we're going to do the same tricks we did previously for the Arano side, and we're going to try to find some immigration information. Specifically, we're going to look for Benjamin, just because we want to see, does it say anything special? Obviously, I will be looking for Nathan. I'm not going to include that in this video, in this episode. There's a lot of research I won't be including in the episode just for the sake of time. Otherwise, I'd have, 2-hour-long episodes each. But we're going to take a look doing the same stuff. So we know Benjamin came in 1929 according to the census. And I'm just going to show that real quick just so that everyone can see where that's coming from. All right, so we're going to zoom in. We know where Benjamin is. He's down here. Same with Bessie. And for the 1930 census is a little bit further than the 1920-1910 census. And so we get it right here. We get immigration year, 1929. So this is an interesting thing because that means that Benjamin was in the U.S. for maybe just over a year before he passed away. We don't know how long Bessie was there before she passed away. One thing that I would do that won't be shown in here, partially because I'll have to wait for it, but finding his grave and a photo of it, specifically going onto the website, find a grave, creating a memorial using the death record we have, knowing the cemetery, hoping someone will go take a photo, but we can also put a note that, is there a Bessie Schenker or other Schenkers around that grave where you could take a photo? And more than likely, if there are, they are the same family. And if we have a Bessie Schenker next to his grave, which we would expect, being that they were spouses, then that will give us the information, because maybe she didn't die until the 1950s, and we just didn't find her in the 1940 census because she went and lived somewhere else. So that's something to consider. And we're also not including a lot of the research I would do for Bessie, just looking at the Schenker name in Ohio and seeing all the different people. And that's a whole different thing. So now I've got the results, and to find them, I actually ended up having to use that Ben Zion name. So here we see the name is spelled Ben Cion, and we see that they're listing there's a relative, Yankel Schenker. So we've got a whole new name. So let's look and see. And there's 2 records, and we're going to talk about that. So first we have our passage, our manifest record, and here we see Ben Zion and Basia. So this is most likely them. Age 63, age 59, so a little bit different than what we had previously, because before they were about the same age, just about a year difference. We see that we have specific towns that they're coming from. So we have Preluki, and then we have Berdyshev. So that's giving us great stuff for following up on records in where they're from. We see that their immigration visas, we have the numbers, so if we can find information on immigration visas issued in Riga, Latvia, maybe we can find more stuff, and maybe there's even a photo. I don't have personal experience looking at those immigration visa numbers, but it's possible that others do, so that's something to consider. And then we see last permanent residence, Odessa. So they were all over the place. They were in Odessa, one born in Preluki, one born in Berdyshev, then they were obviously in Latvia as well. So is this giving us an idea of their traveling, especially going from Odessa to Latvia, then making it to the US? So looking into those the migration routes, we could possibly get an idea. Like I know a very common one to see will be going from Hamburg to England to the US, sometimes just Hamburg to the US. I've also seen often from Rotterdam, but we don't see that Yankel. So we're going to go to the next page and see what do we have. And well, looky there, we have son Yankel Schenker living in Odessa as the name and complete address of nearest relative. Fortunately, we don't have an exact address. Odessa is huge, but now we have a whole new name, and this could be something that we could look into to see, did he immigrate over here? Did he have any relatives that immigrated over here? Like, did Yankel have any children possibly? So we'll have to, that's something to look into. And we see that final destination is Cleveland, Ohio. That's what we're expecting. And then we see, look at that, going to son Nathan Schenker, and this is 1929. We have address 1024 Lime Street. We know 1930 census was Drexel, so something a little funky going on there, but having looked at the records, seeing that there's likely only one Nathan Schenker in Ohio, as far as I can tell at that time, I'm thinking this is very likely him. There is this note, not quite sure what it says, but something that is very interesting is that we do know that they were actually held for further questioning. So going back, looking at this first record, this is actually information on them being held. So record of aliens held for special inquiry. So here we have Benjamin Schenker, and then we get he's a 63-year-old male. Then we have that index number 8, group number 8, number 1 and 2. So this has to deal with the manifest records. We see that he's from Russia. Then we get cause of detention. And we see that it says PHDEF LPC. Now, I know that for LPC, that is usually an indication that they basically are worried that this person is going to become a drain on the system in a sense, or the best way to put it is they're going to be reliant on the government as opposed to becoming productive citizens. And so they're then held, but you can get really interesting stuff with this information. And then we see that he was admitted on 6/11. And then we see that we get some more information on when they were released. So at this point, we have built a pretty good chunk of the tree for the Schenker side. We've gotten 2 new names. We have a name of Nathan's brother, Yankel. We also have the name of Nathan's grandfather, Nathan, so that's probably where he's getting the name from. And from here, this is where we would then start doing a lot of what we did in the previous episodes for the Aronow family. So looking at Jewish Gen, looking at J-Roots, looking at what's available through Alex Krakowski's digitized records, looking at the different Kahila links, looking for Facebook groups, and basically just kind of looking what is available and getting into that nitty-gritty. Now we're going to stop here for the Schenker side, so that the next episode we're then going to focus on the Chernik side of the family. So for the next episode, we'll be looking into that Chernik side, but we're also going to be looking at what's going on with this Balat's name. Is there some family connection going on? Is there something more to it? Could Leah and Meta be cousins? Or maybe they just have the same name? Maybe something else is going on and Belitz is meaning something else. Well, thank you so much for checking out this video. I do hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. That really does help me out. If you'd like to get access to my content early, or even more, get access to exclusive content, like videos that you can't find on my YouTube channel, be sure to become a patron of mine on Patreon, and not only will you get all that fun stuff, but you'll also be helping support my channel. I'd also like to thank my current patrons, Jim Vivoda, Suzanne O'Connor, Tan A. Summers, Megan House, Ryan Dale, Sergei Fazulyanov, Stephanie Jones, and Shelley Rogers. And being that this is the first time I've actually thanked my patrons, I'd also like to thank previous patrons, including John, Madeline Fisher, Laura Pugali, and Sarah LaForce. You can also click right about here if you'd like to subscribe. It is completely free to do so. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at GeneaVlogger. I'm the GeneaVlogger. See you in my next video.